The wind howled across the frozen plains of Cathara Prime, like the screams of 1,000 dying souls. Ice crystals sharp as broken glass cut through the air, and the temperature reading on the Academy's monitors showed -78 degrees. It was a world where nothing should live, yet somehow it did, and it was hungry. Cadet Marcus Chen stood in the briefing room listening to Instructor Vorth explain the trial that had broken every cadet who attempted it for the past 300 years. The massive Carathian's forearms gestured at the holographic display showing Cathara Prime's endless white wasteland. "This is not a test you are meant to pass," Vorth said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "This is a lesson in humility. You will learn that nature is stronger than any weapon, any armor, any training we can give you. You will learn your limits." Around Marcus, his fellow cadets shifted nervously. Crix, his Zelithian friend, had skin that could change color with emotion. Right now, it was a pale blue that meant fear. The tall, thin alien looked at Marcus with his large black eyes. "You cannot be serious about this," Crix whispered. "Humans are not built for such cold." "Your species comes from a warm world," Marcus smiled. Earth was many things, but it had never been consistently warm. His ancestors had survived ice ages, had hunted mammoth across frozen tundra, had lived through winters that lasted for months. But he did not say this. The galaxy still thought humans were soft. Vextar, a Thacarian warrior with scales that gleamed like metal, laughed with a sound like grinding stone. "The little mammal wants to play with the ice wolves. How amusing. Perhaps we should start planning his funeral now." The Thacarians were proud fighters, evolved from predators on a harsh desert world. They thought themselves the ultimate warriors in the galaxy. They had never lost a cadet to the Cathara trial, but only because they were too smart to try it. Their scales could not handle the extreme cold. "The trial lasts 7 days, Vorth continued. You will be given basic cold weather gear, emergency rations for 3 days, and a distress beacon. The moment you activate that beacon, you fail. Most cadets last 6 hours before the cold breaks their will." Marcus raised his hand. "What about the ice wolves?" A hush fell over the room. Even Vorth seemed surprised by the question. "The ice wolves are the apex predators of Cathara Prime," Vorth said slowly. "They are 3 meters long, hunt in packs, and their bite can freeze blood in your veins. They have killed 17 cadets over the centuries. Before we learned to extract failed candidates quickly, you should pray you never see one. But they are the real test, are they not?" Marcus asked. "Not the cold. The cold is just the environment. The wolves are what make it impossible." Vorth stared at him for a long moment. "Cadet Chen, I have watched thousands of young warriors attempt this trial. The cold breaks them long before any predator finds them. Do not think about the wolves. Think about surviving the first hour." That evening, Marcus sat in his dormitory room cleaning his gear. The cold weather suit was standard issue, designed for moderate sub-zero temperatures. It would not be enough for Cathara Prime. The emergency rations were nutrition bars that tasted like cardboard and provided basic calories. The distress beacon was small and red with a single button that meant surrender. Crix entered without knocking, his skin now showing orange stripes of worry. "This is madness, Marcus. No cadet has ever completed this trial. Why do you think you can?" Marcus looked up from his gear. "Because no cadet has ever needed to complete it." "I do not understand. They all go in thinking it is impossible. They expect to fail. They plan to fail. They carry the beacon like a safety net." Marcus held up the small device. "This is not a tool for success. This is a tool for giving up. But the cold will kill you in hours without proper gear. The gear they give us is not proper gear. It is minimum gear. It is meant to keep us alive long enough to learn we cannot survive." Crix's skin rippled with confusion. "Then how will you survive?" Marcus smiled again. "I will not survive with their gear. I will survive by making better gear. From what? There is nothing on that world but ice and death. There are ice wolves." The next morning, Marcus stood at the transport platform with 20 other cadets who had come to watch. Most looked at him with pity, some with curiosity. Vextar looked at him with amusement. "Last chance to save face, human," the Thacarian said. "Admit you are not ready and try again next year." "I am ready," Marcus said. Instructor Vorth approached with the medical team. They attached sensors to Marcus that would monitor his vital signs from orbit: heart rate, body temperature, brain activity. The Academy would watch him slowly freeze to death in real time. "Cadet Chen," Vorth said formally. Do you understand that this trial has never been completed in 300 years? Do you understand that you are likely to die? I understand that no one has completed it yet, Marcus replied. The transport ship was small and fast. It dropped through Kythera Prime's atmosphere like a falling stone. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the endless white below. No landmarks, no shelter, no life visible from this height. Just ice and wind and death. The ship landed with a thud that shook snow from the trees that somehow grew in this wasteland. The pilot, a grizzled Carathian veteran, looked back at Marcus. Drop zone is as close to the center of the test area as we can get. 7 days from now, if you are still alive, we will pick you up from this exact spot. If you activate the beacon, we will come immediately. If your vital signs stop, we will come for your body. Marcus nodded and stepped toward the airlock. Human, the pilot called. For what it is worth, you have courage. Stupid courage, but courage nonetheless. The airlock cycled open and the cold hit Marcus like a physical blow. Even through his suit, he could feel the ice trying to steal the warmth from his body. His breath came out in white clouds that froze and fell like snow. He stepped onto the surface of Kythera Prime. The transport ship lifted off immediately, disappearing into the gray sky above. Marcus was alone. The wind was worse than he had expected. It did not just blow. It attacked. It found every gap in his clothing, every exposed inch of skin. It carried ice crystals that stung like needles and snow that tried to blind him. Marcus pulled out a small device and checked his position. The pickup point was marked on his map. He had 7 days to stay alive in this place that killed everything. He looked around at the barren landscape. In the distance, he could see the dark shapes of the stunted trees. They were twisted and black, barely alive in this cold. But they were alive, which meant survival was possible. Marcus began walking toward the trees. Behind him, his footprints filled with snow almost immediately. In orbit above, 20 pairs of alien eyes watched his vital signs on monitors, waiting for them to flatline. The trial had begun. In the monitoring station, Instructor Vorth watched the human's steady heartbeat on the display. How long do you think he will last? Asked Dr. Kess, the chief medical officer. 6 hours, Vorth replied. Maybe 8 if he is stubborn. They had no idea that Marcus Chen was not planning to last. He was planning to live. Marcus had been walking for 2 hours when he found the first sign of life. Not the stunted trees that barely counted as living, but something else. Tracks in the snow, already half filled but still visible. 4 paw prints, each the size of his hand with claw marks that cut deep into the frozen ground. Ice wolf. He knelt beside the tracks, brushing away the loose snow with his gloved hand. The prints were fresh, maybe an hour old. The wolf had been moving fast, probably hunting. Marcus followed the trail with his eyes and saw where it led, toward a cluster of the black trees about half a kilometer away. In the monitoring station orbiting above, Dr. Kess watched Marcus's vitals with growing concern. His heart rate is elevated, she reported to Instructor Vorth, and his body temperature is dropping faster than expected. Normal. For the first few hours, Vorth replied, though his 4 eyes never left the screen. The shock of the environment always hits them hard. He will activate the beacon soon. But Marcus was not thinking about the beacon. He was thinking about shelter. The trees were his best option, but they were also where the wolves hunted. He needed to be smart about this. He pulled out his emergency rations and ate one of the nutrition bars while he walked. The food was tasteless and cold, but it would give him energy. He would need all the energy he could get. The trees were even more twisted up close than they had looked from a distance. Their bark was black and hard as stone, shaped by centuries of freezing wind. Most were dead or dying, but a few still had life in them. Marcus could tell because they had small, dark leaves that somehow survived the cold. He found what he was looking for between 3 of the larger trees, a natural windbreak where the snow had piled up in a drift. It was not much, but it was a start. Marcus began to dig. His gloves were not made for digging in frozen ground, but he had no choice. He used a flat piece of metal from his emergency kit and his hands scooping out snow and ice. The work was hard and cold, but it warmed his body. After an hour, he had carved out a small cave in the snowdrift. It was barely big enough for him to crawl inside, but it cut the wind. More importantly, it was hidden. From the outside, it looked like just another pile of snow, but a hole in the snow was not enough. He needed heat. Marcus gathered dead branches from the twisted trees. They were frozen solid and covered in ice, but wood was wood. He broke them into smaller pieces and carried them back to his shelter. Fire was the next problem. His emergency kit had a small heating element powered by a battery, but the battery would not last long in this cold. He needed to make fire the old way. Marcus had learned this skill as a child during camping trips with his grandfather. The old man had insisted that technology could fail, but knowledge never would. Marcus had thought it was silly then. Now it might save his life. He found 2 pieces of the driest wood he could locate and began to rub them together. It was harder than he remembered. The wood was so cold that it sucked the heat away as fast as he could create it. His hands were numb inside his gloves, making it difficult to maintain pressure. But humans were persistent creatures. Marcus kept working, rubbing the wood together with steady, patient motions. After 20 minutes, he saw the first thin wisp of smoke. In orbit, Instructor Vorth frowned at his display. "What is he doing?" Dr. Kess asked. "His vitals show he is working hard, but he has been in the same location for 2 hours. Building shelter, most likely. They all try it. It delays the inevitable, but rarely works. The cold will find him soon enough." On the ground, Marcus blew gently on the tiny ember he had created. Smoke rose from the wood, and then, like magic, a small flame appeared. He fed the fire carefully with the smallest twigs he could find, building it up slowly until it was strong enough to burn the larger branches. The heat felt like a miracle against his frozen face. But the fire was just the beginning. Marcus knew the ice wolves could smell smoke from kilometers away. He was announcing his presence to every predator on this frozen world. That was fine. He wanted them to know where he was. While the fire burned, Marcus improved his shelter. He used his emergency kit to cut more branches and wove them into walls around his snow cave. It was not pretty, but it would hold his heat and hide his fire from the wind. Then he began to prepare weapons. The emergency kit had a small knife, barely longer than his thumb. It was meant for cutting food packages, not for fighting wolves. But Marcus could work with it. He found a straight branch about the length of his arm and began to sharpen one end with the knife. It was slow work with such a small blade, but eventually he had a crude spear. Not much against a 3-meter wolf, but better than nothing. Next, he looked for stones. The ground was frozen hard, but he found several rocks near the base of the trees. He tested their weight and chose the best ones. Humans had been throwing rocks at things much longer than they had been making spears. As the day wore on, Marcus made more weapons. Another spear, a wooden club, a sling made from strips of cloth cut from his emergency gear. Each weapon was simple and crude, but effective. The ice wolves would come. Everything in his body told him so. The tracks, the smell of his fire, the basic predator instincts that every creature on this world would have. They would come, and when they did, he would be ready. As night fell, the temperature dropped even further. Marcus fed his fire carefully, keeping it hot but small. Too big and it would attract too much attention. Too small and he would freeze. He ate another nutrition bar and settled down to wait. The fire cast dancing shadows on the trees around him. And every shadow looked like a wolf. At midnight, he heard the first howl. It was far away, maybe 2 kilometers, but it carried clearly in the thin, cold air, a long, mournful sound that spoke of hunger and hunting. Other howls answered it from different directions. The pack was calling to each other, organizing. Marcus checked his weapons one more time and added another branch to his fire. The flames leaped higher, sending sparks up into the dark sky. The second howl was closer. In the monitoring station, Dr. Kess watched Marcus's vital signs spike. His heart rate just jumped to 120, she reported. Something has him scared. Probably heard the wolves, Vorth said. They are most active at night. He will be dead before dawn, but Marcus was not scared. He was excited. For 300 years, cadets had come to this world and tried to hide from the predators. They had built shelters and rationed food and waited for rescue. They had treated the ice wolves like a natural disaster to be endured. Marcus understood something they had not. The ice wolves were not a disaster. They were a resource. The third howl was very close. Just beyond the ring of trees, Marcus could hear movement in the snow, the soft padding of huge paws. He gripped his spear and waited. Yellow eyes appeared at the edge of his firelight. Then more eyes. The pack had found him. Marcus smiled and stood up. The real trial was about to begin. The ice wolves moved like ghosts around the edge of Marcus's firelight. He counted at least 6 pairs of yellow eyes, but there could be more hidden in the darkness. Each wolf was the size of a small horse with thick white fur that made them almost invisible against the snow. Marcus stood perfectly still, spear in hand, watching them circle. The wolves were smart. They did not rush in like mindless beasts. They studied him, looking for weakness, planning their attack. The alpha was easy to spot. It was larger than the others, with scars across its muzzle that spoke of many battles. It sat just outside the firelight, completely still, yellow eyes fixed on Marcus, waiting. In the monitoring station, alarms began to sound. Multiple large life forms detected around the human, Dr. Kess reported, her voice tight with worry. Heart rate at 140. He is about to be attacked. Instructor Vorth leaned forward in his chair. Prepare the emergency extraction team. We may need to recover his body quickly. But down on the frozen surface, Marcus was not thinking about dying. He was thinking about living. And living meant becoming something the wolves did not expect. One of the smaller wolves took a step closer to the fire. Marcus moved at the same instant, not toward the wolf, but away from it. He grabbed a burning branch from his fire and threw it directly at the approaching predator. The wolf yelped and jumped back as sparks scattered across its fur. The smell of singed hair filled the air. The pack shifted nervously, confused by prey that fought back. Marcus had just changed the rules of the game. He grabbed another burning branch and held it like a torch, keeping his spear ready in his other hand. The wolves were no longer circling. They were backing away, uncertain. The alpha growled, a sound like grinding ice. It was not afraid, but it was cautious. This human was not behaving like the other prey animals on this world. For the next hour, Marcus and the wolves watched each other. Neither side moved to attack. The fire burned lower, and Marcus carefully fed it more wood. The wolves waited. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the sky, the pack melted away into the trees. But Marcus knew they would be back. Wolves were patient hunters. They would follow him, study him, wait for him to make a mistake. That was fine. Marcus was a patient hunter too. He spent the second day tracking the pack. It was not hard to find them. They had not gone far, and their tracks in the snow were easy to follow. Marcus stayed downwind and moved quietly through the trees, learning their patterns. The wolves had made their den in a small valley about a kilometer from Marcus's shelter. There were 8 adults and 3 cubs. They took turns hunting and guarding the den, working together like a military unit. Marcus watched them for hours, making mental notes. The alpha always hunted with 2 other wolves. The female with cubs never left the den. The younger wolves were eager but inexperienced. Most importantly, they had a routine. Every evening, the hunting party followed the same path through the trees, looking for the small prey animals that somehow survived in this frozen world. Marcus began to plan. On the 3rd day, he moved his camp. Not far, just to a different cluster of trees along the wolves' hunting route. He built another shelter, smaller and better hidden than the first. He prepared new weapons and gathered more stones. Most importantly, he found a trap site. The path the wolves used ran between 2 large trees with a narrow gap in between. It was the perfect place for an ambush, but only if Marcus could separate one wolf from the pack. That night, he put his plan into action. Marcus built his fire larger than usual and cooked one of his emergency rations over the flames. The smell of heated food would carry on the wind, advertising his location to every predator in the area. Then he waited. The wolves came, as he knew they would. But tonight Marcus was not at his fire. He was hidden in the trees 20 meters away, watching. The alpha approached the abandoned fire cautiously, nose testing the air. It could smell the human but could not see him. The other wolves hung back, letting their leader investigate. Marcus had left a trail of food scraps leading away from the fire, deeper into the trees. The alpha followed the trail step by step, away from its pack. When the wolf was far enough from the others, Marcus struck. He had climbed into one of the twisted trees, perched on a thick branch directly above the trail. As the alpha passed beneath him, Marcus dropped. He landed on the wolf's back, driving his spear down with all his weight behind it. The point pierced through the thick fur and muscle, finding the space between the ribs. The alpha wolf howled in pain and fury, bucking like a wild horse. Marcus held on desperately, wrapping his arm around the creature's thick neck. The wolf was incredibly strong, but Marcus had 2 advantages: surprise and position. The fight was brutal and short. The wolf tried to roll over to crush Marcus, but he rolled off at the last second, keeping hold of his spear. When the alpha tried to bite him, Marcus jammed his wooden club into its mouth. In the end, it was not strength that won the battle, but patience. The wolf was built for short, explosive hunts. Marcus was built for endurance. He kept moving, kept fighting, kept bleeding the wolf's energy until it could no longer stand. When the great predator finally fell, Marcus knelt beside it and placed his hand on its massive head. He had taken a life, and that deserved respect. "Thank you," he whispered to the dead wolf. "You will keep me alive." The other wolves found their alpha's body an hour later. Their howls of rage and grief echoed across the frozen valley. But they also found something else, the scent of a predator who was no longer prey. Marcus worked through the night, skinning the wolf with his small knife. It was hard work, but he had learned the basics from his grandfather years ago. The fur was thick and warm, perfectly designed for surviving in extreme cold. By morning, he had what he needed. The wolf's pelt would make a coat far better than his failing thermal suit. The meat would feed him for days. The bones could be carved into better tools. In the monitoring station, Dr. Kess stared at her instruments in disbelief. "His body temperature has stabilized," she reported. "Heart rate is normal." "How is this possible?" Instructor Vorth said nothing. On his screen, he could see the human moving around his campsite. But there was something different about him now. Something that made the old soldier feel uneasy. Marcus. Chen was no longer trying to survive Cathara Prime. He was thriving on it. The remaining wolves watched from a distance as the human wrapped himself in their alpha's fur. They did not understand what they were seeing. In their world, prey did not kill predators. Prey ran and hid and died. But this creature was something new. Something that hunted the hunters. For the first time in their lives, the ice wolves of Cathara Prime felt fear. Marcus woke on the 6th day wrapped in wolf fur and feeling truly warm for the first time since landing on Cathara Prime. The pelt of the alpha wolf covered him like a blanket made by nature itself, thick and perfectly insulated against the bitter cold. He had spent the previous days transforming from a struggling cadet into something else entirely. The wolf meat had restored his strength. The fur kept him warm. Most importantly, he had learned to read this frozen world like a book. He knew where to find the small ice rabbits that burrowed under the snow. He knew which of the twisted trees had edible bark that could supplement his diet. He knew the wind patterns that told him when storms were coming. He had stopped fighting Cathara Prime and started living with it. But today was different. Today he had to make a choice. Marcus sat up in his improved shelter and checked his emergency kit. The distress beacon sat there red and untouched. Tomorrow was the 7th day. If he stayed where he was, the Academy would send a ship to pick him up at the original drop zone. If he activated the beacon, they would come immediately. Or he could do something no cadet had ever done before. He could walk back to the pickup point under his own power. In the monitoring station, Dr. Kess was having an argument with Instructor Vorth. "His vital signs have been stable for 3 days, she said, pointing at her display. "Body temperature normal, heart rate normal, brain activity normal. He is not just surviving down there. He is healthy." "Impossible," Vorth rumbled. "No cadet can survive 7 days on Cathara Prime. The environment is too harsh." "Then explain this." Dr. Kess pulled up a record of Marcus's movements over the past day. He has been exploring. Not just surviving, exploring. Yesterday he traveled over 5 kilometers from his base camp and returned. That is not the behavior of someone who is barely staying alive. Vorth studied the data with growing unease. In 300 years of trials, no cadet had ever shown this kind of activity pattern. They huddled in their shelters and tried to conserve energy until rescue came. They did not go exploring. Perhaps the cold has affected his mind, Vorth suggested. Hypothermia can cause strange behavior. His brain scans are normal. Better than normal, actually. He appears to be thinking more clearly than when he started. Down on the surface, Marcus was making his decision. He could wait for pickup, but that felt like giving up. He had proven he could survive Cathara Prime. Now he wanted to prove he could master it. Marcus broke camp methodically, packing everything he had learned to make or find. The wolf pelt went around his shoulders like a cloak. Strips of wolf meat went into his pack alongside the few remaining emergency rations. His crude weapons hung from his belt. He looked like something from humanity's ancient past, a hunter from the Ice Age dressed in fur and carrying stone-tipped spears. but his eyes were sharp and alert, and his movements had the confidence of a predator in its own territory. The walk back to the pickup point was 12 kilometers across open tundra. Marcus had studied the route from his hilltop observations and knew the fastest path. More importantly, he knew which areas to avoid. As he walked, he left tracks in the snow that told a story. Deep, steady footprints that showed no signs of hurry or weakness. The tracks of someone who belonged here. The remaining ice wolves followed him at a distance. They had been stalking him for days, trying to understand what he was. Their alpha was dead, their pack broken. But they could not leave this strange creature alone. Marcus knew they were there. He could smell them on the wind and hear their soft footfalls in the snow. But he was no longer worried about them. They were no longer the apex predators of this valley. He was. Halfway to the pickup point, Marcus encountered another pack of wolves. Fresh wolves who had not learned to fear him yet. They blocked his path, 6 adults with hunger in their yellow eyes. The old Marcus would have been terrified. The new Marcus simply stopped walking and considered his options. He could go around them, but that would take hours and show weakness. He could try to scare them off, but these wolves had not seen what happened to the last pack that challenged him. Instead, Marcus did something that no prey animal had ever done on Cathara Prime. He walked directly toward the largest wolf. The predators were confused. Prey was supposed to run. That was how the hunt worked. The wolves spread out to surround this strange creature, but it kept walking straight at them. When Marcus was close enough to see the ice crystals in the lead wolf's fur, he stopped. For a long moment, human and wolf stared at each other. Then Marcus pulled back his lips and showed his teeth in what might have been a smile. The wolf took a step back. Marcus had learned something important during his days on this world. Predators recognized other predators. It was not about size or claws or fangs. It was about confidence. It was about the willingness to fight and kill when necessary. The wolves could smell the alpha's blood on his fur. They could see the way he moved, balanced and ready. Most importantly, they could sense something in his eyes that they had never seen in prey before. The pack melted away into the snow, leaving Marcus's path clear. He reached the pickup point 2 hours before the scheduled extraction time. The landing zone was exactly as he remembered it, a flat area of packed snow surrounded by the twisted trees. But now Marcus saw it differently. He saw the wind patterns, the hunting paths, the hidden dangers that he had been blind to a week ago. Marcus built a small fire and settled down to wait. He ate a piece of wolf meat and watched the sky for signs of the transport ship. The meat was tough and gamey, but it was food he had earned through his own skill and courage. When the ship finally appeared as a dot in the gray sky, Marcus stood and shouldered his pack. The wolf pelt hung around him like a banner, and his crude weapons were displayed proudly at his belt. The ship landed in a cloud of blown snow, and the airlock cycled open. The same grizzled Carathian pilot who had dropped him off stepped out, followed by a medical team with emergency equipment. They stopped when they saw Marcus. He looked nothing like the cadet who had entered the trial 7 days ago. The wolf fur made him look larger and more dangerous. His eyes were calm and alert, scanning the tree line out of habit. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had learned to belong in this harsh place. "Cadet Chen?" the pilot asked uncertainly. "Ready for extraction," Marcus replied. The medical team swarmed him with scanners and instruments, checking for frostbite, hypothermia, malnutrition, and psychological trauma. They found none of it. His body temperature was normal. His reflexes were sharp. His mind was clear. "How?" Dr. Kess asked over the comm system. "How did you survive?" Marcus looked out at the frozen landscape that had tried to kill him and had instead made him stronger. "I learned," he said simply. As the ship lifted off, Marcus pressed his face to the viewport and watched Cathara Prime fall away below him. Somewhere down there, the ice wolves were howling, but they were not hunting calls anymore. They were songs of respect for a predator who had earned his place in their world. The transport ship docked with the Academy station in complete silence. Word had already spread through the corridors about what the medical scanners had found. Cadet Marcus Chen had not just survived the Cathara Prime trial. He had completed it in perfect health, carrying fresh meat and wearing the fur of an apex predator. It was impossible. In 300 years, it had never happened. Marcus walked down the docking ramp still wrapped in the ice wolf pelt, and the assembled crowd of cadets and instructors parted before him like water. He looked different now. moving with a quiet confidence that made everyone instinctively step back. Crix was the first to approach, his Zilithian skin cycling through colors of amazement and fear. "Marcus," he whispered, "what happened to you down there?" "I remembered who I am," Marcus replied. The answer made no sense to Crix, but something in Marcus's eyes suggested it was the only answer he would get. Instructor Vorth pushed through the crowd, his forearms crossed in a gesture of skeptical authority. "Cadet Chen, report to Medical Bay immediately for full examination. Then you will be debriefed about your experience." Marcus nodded calmly. "Of course, sir." But as he walked toward medical, other cadets fell into step behind him. They wanted to see this impossible thing for themselves, the human who had survived the unsurvivable. In Medical Bay, Dr. Kess ran every test she could think of. Blood work, brain scans, psychological evaluations, genetic analysis. She was looking for some explanation, some hidden advantage that humans possessed that no one knew about. "Your muscle density has actually increased," she reported to Marcus as she studied the results. "Your reflexes are faster than when you started. Your body fat percentage is lower despite limited food. It is as if the trial made you stronger, not weaker." Marcus sat patiently through the examination, still wearing the wolf pelt. He had not taken it off since returning, and no one had asked him to. Something about the way he wore it suggested it was not just clothing anymore. It was part of who he had become. "The psychological evaluation is the most interesting part," Dr. Kess continued. "Your stress hormone levels are actually lower than they were before the trial. Most cadets who survive traumatic experiences show elevated stress markers for months afterward. You show the opposite pattern." "The trial was not traumatic," Marcus said quietly. "It was educational." Dr. Kess stared at him. "You killed an apex predator with primitive weapons and survived alone on a death world for 7 days. How was that not traumatic?" "Because I was not alone," Marcus replied. "I was with my ancestors." The cryptic answer frustrated Dr. Kess, but she had learned enough about humans to know they often spoke in metaphors that other species found confusing. The debriefing took place in the Academy's main conference room. Instructor Vorth sat at the head of a long table, flanked by other senior staff members. Species from across the galaxy were represented: Carathians, Zilithians, Thacarians, and others. Marcus sat at the opposite end of the table, still in his wolf fur, and calmly answered their questions. "How did you survive the cold?" asked Commander Zex, a Thacarian with scales that gleamed like polished metal. "I made better clothing from local materials." "How did you find food?" "I hunted." "How did you kill an ice wolf?" "With patience and persistence." The answers were maddeningly simple, as if Marcus had done nothing more remarkable than completing a routine exercise. But everyone in the room knew that what he had accomplished was anything but routine. Finally, Instructor Vorth leaned forward. "Cadet Chen, do you understand that you have done something unprecedented? In 300 years, no cadet has completed this trial." "I understand that no cadet needed to complete this trial," Marcus replied. "They all went in expecting to fail. I went in expecting to succeed. But the trial is designed to be impossible. It is meant to teach humility, not to be conquered." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. "With respect, sir, the trial teaches what you expect it to teach. If you expect it to teach humility, then it will break those who attempt it. If you expect it to teach survival, then it will strengthen those who embrace it." Commander Zex snorted. "You speak as if mindset alone determined the outcome. The cold is real. The predators are real. The lack of food is real." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "They are all real, but they are also all survivable, if you have the right tools." "You had the same tools as every other cadet," Vorth pointed out. "No," Marcus said, and for the first time his calm facade cracked slightly. "I had different tools. I had the tools my species evolved with over millions of years, tools that most galactic civilizations have forgotten." The room fell silent. This was the heart of it, the thing they all sensed but could not name. "What tools?" Dr. Kess asked quietly. Marcus stood and walked to the large viewport that showed the stars beyond the station. The wolf pelt moved around him like living shadow. "Persistence," he said. "Adaptability. The willingness to become what the environment requires. Most species evolved in stable environments. They specialized. Humans evolved in chaos. We learned to change." He turned back to face the assembled officers. You see the trial as a test of endurance, something to be survived until rescue comes. I saw it as a new environment to be mastered. The difference is not in our bodies or our technology. It is in our minds. Vextar, who had been silent throughout the debriefing, finally spoke. You sound like you enjoyed it. Marcus smiled, and several officers involuntarily shifted in their seats. There was something predatory in that smile now, something that had not been there a week ago. I learned something about myself down there, Marcus said, something I had forgotten. Humans are not the weak species you think we are. We are not built for comfort or safety. We are built for survival. The debriefing ended soon after that, but the real impact was just beginning. Within hours, the story had spread throughout the academy. The human who had conquered the unconquerable trial. The cadet who had killed an ice wolf and worn its fur like a trophy. Other cadets began to look at humans differently. Crix found himself studying Marcus with new eyes, trying to reconcile this confident predator with the friend he thought he knew. Are all humans like this? Crix asked one evening as they sat in the dormitory common area. Like what? Marcus replied, though he was cleaning one of his crude spears as he spoke. Dangerous. Marcus considered the question seriously. We can be. When we need to be. When survival requires it. But most of the time you seem so peaceful. Peace is a luxury, Marcus said. It exists because someone is capable of violence on behalf of those who are not. The Academy administration held long meetings about what to do with the trial results. Some wanted to classify Marcus's success as an anomaly and continue the trial as before. Others suggested that the trial itself needed to be reconsidered. In the end, they made a small but significant change to the trial protocols. A new notation was added to the official records. Trial unsuitable for human cadets without additional preparation. It was a diplomatic way of saying that humans were too dangerous to be thrown into survival situations without warning. The survival situation first. Marcus graduated from the academy 6 months later, ranked first in his class. He wore his dress uniform to the ceremony, but the ice wolf pelt hung in his dormitory room like a reminder of what lay beneath the civilized surface. When asked about his career plans, Marcus smiled, that predatory smile that had become his trademark. I think I would like to explore some of the galaxy's more challenging environments, he said. I have learned that I enjoy the educational opportunities they provide. The galaxy had welcomed humanity as a minor species, useful for their diplomatic skills and technological aptitude. They had not expected to discover that humans were something much more dangerous. They had not expected to learn that when pushed to the edge of survival, humans did not break. They adapted. They evolved. They became the apex predator. And once that change occurred, they remembered what they had always been beneath the veneer of civilization. The species that had hunted mammoths across ice sheets, that had survived ice ages and volcanic winters, that had crawled up from the bottom of the food chain by refusing to accept that anything was truly impossible. The galaxy had wanted to teach humanity humility. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy respect.